Hi, everybody on here, and I'm coming to you with this month's Connecting Codes video for November Insights, what's going on, what we can expect under world events that are happening, and where we're going to see things get hot. So my work is called The Code Journey. This is actually the 2023 edition. It's kind of hard to see when I use the backgrounds on here, which I have to do sometimes when I'm traveling to not show icky backgrounds of things. But anyways, 2024 is actually out and I'm excited for that. I'm happy to have that out at this point. You can check everything out on my website, compassioncodes.com, and check out more of that work. And it's all original work that blends over 50 different modalities, none of which are used in the traditional ways. I know a lot of times people try to connect things with astrology and numerology, but because the way I look at things are not done in a traditional way, it oftentimes, um, is not going to connect up with those pieces in there. So it's a different perspective on things, but it does give us an insight of the energetic vibrations that are present. And when we understand those energetic vibrations that are present at a given time, then we know also when things might get more active with military things, or when people are not going to be able to pursue things, or when we're going to see people search out more control in the world and things like that. So that's really what this does. And this helps us to understand and have some foresight of what's coming. And if we understand what's coming, if we understand some of the things that are in motion to happen, then we can use that information to help guide us to take wiser choices, to maybe not get caught in bad situations, to know when might be a good time to go out and vocalize and put our voice out there, and when it might be better for us to just kind of lay low and not be a part of something that's going on because of potential danger that could be involved at that time. And that's how we start to shift things, is through that wisdom. So this month on November Insights, I am looking at my topic, my headline, the Beatles said it in 1968, and that came about with their song Revolution, which is really interesting if you go in and you take a look at what the background, the history was behind that song. Some of the aspects, you're going to find a lot of interesting connections, because they were talking about Vietnam War, they were talking about socialism, they were talking about um, Leninist and Marxist philosophies coming through. They were talking about China's leaders, not the one we currently have, but they were talking about Mao at that time, and various other things that are happening. And what's very interesting is a lot of those components are actually quite present in our world today. We're looking at Vietnam possibly being attacked again. We're looking at a whole variety of things. Of course, China is very active in things. We're seeing the socialist movement come up. We're seeing a lot of different components that are actually very parallel, or almost like the past repeating itself to a certain extent, as what we saw during that time. So I thought it was a really appropriate picture for us. I have a little bit of sense of humor at times too. I did that a couple of months ago with serving humans in the Twilight Zone mem. And so hopefully people can see my humor in this and not get too bent out of shape with it all. So when we start to look at this, and it was interesting because John Lennon was, even though, we know he had different attachments, and anytime you're in the entertainment industry, you're very susceptible to a lot of pressure and tension, and having to follow narratives and things like that. Not all of them do, obviously. We have some great entertainers out there that are not following those narratives, and they were speaking up against them. And Lennon was one of those that actually he was in more of the transcendental meditation movements, and he was one of those that actually was looking in certain directions and was wanting to call some stuff out, but then kind of got trapped in the aspect of, I think, being silenced a little bit. And that's just my personal opinion, that he backed down on some things. He actually removed some of the comments or mentioned that maybe he shouldn't have mentioned things about Mao in that song. And so it's kind of interesting when you start to put these things together and you can go back and find these different points in history that actually connect to our present. And that's always important with the code work, because one of our key patterns has to do with past, present, and future. And we need to understand our past. We need to understand the history. We need to understand the things that have happened before so that we understand where they're repeating. Because when they repeat, the agendas are always the same, basically, in there. And the repetition of the agendas, or the repeating patterns of them, if we're understanding them, then we can actually manage them, handle them, do something about them, decide what we do and do not want. And that is what helps us create a favorable future moving forward. These are all important connections, because as we get into looking at the November insights and what the energy current patterns are in our world affairs that connect to it, a lot of November connects to world events and world affairs. And that's not something we're going to get out of. I mean, part of even being in spiritual aspects, God-based aspects, if it's more spiritual than God for you, whatever that is, um, these components come up. So on one hand, we don't really want to intermingle them. And on another hand, you're not going to totally separate them, because energy is energy, and how it manifests is going to come out, whether we like it or not. Basically, it's gonna happen, it's gonna manifest. So in November, one of the big things that we have that we see coming up is revolutionary energy rises from strife and failure and things. And this is a point where it's showing me, I think, in a lot of ways. And of course, I'm recording this a couple of weeks ahead of November. But the revolutionary energy, when we look at it, this shows me that people are hitting that breaking point. They're hitting the precipice. They're hitting that aspect of, I've had enough. I'm, they're feeling broken down in many ways. And so this sense of failure, the sense of not making progression, the sense of too much hardship in the world, um, the revolutionary energy is going to rise. People are going to stand up and see that. And we even saw that in America, for example, on the day of jihad, where there were a lot of people sitting around going, I'm not going to sit around in fear. I'm not going to sit around and do this. I'm, going to sit outside and, well, some of the more, you know, um, strong voices, shall we say, um, we're saying, I'm going to be sitting on my porch with my gun, basically, and so that is an interesting, I think, dynamic when we start to see that, because that's showing us, look, we've had enough. We've had enough of this. And so that's a lot of times where the revolutionary energy is going to come out of. And this is where we start to see that it takes people hitting that strife, or that sense of failure, or that hard spot, before they will stand up and do something. But I think at this point, what we're going to see in November is a lot of people are ready to stand up. They are ready to be vocal. They're ready to do what needs to be done, uh, to protect rights, to protect freedom, to protect lives, to do a lot of things that hopefully will send us in a favorable direction along the way. And no, I don't condone a lot of things. I don't condone all of the wars. I do believe people have a right to defend themselves. Um, they don't have to sit in defenseless positions. But that being said, I think we need to look at bigger paths moving forward as well, of how do we get to those points where people don't have to be in that position of needing to defend themselves. And that's a tough thing, because there's almost always going to be people who want control and power in the world. And it's when that continues to accelerate that we get to a point that we have to consider, do we defend ourselves or not? So I think revolutions and things like that oftentimes become, in some ways, they become an immediate solution, but they're not always the permanent solution. And that's something that we want to keep in mind. How do we get to those more permanent solutions where we can turn things around to where things are safe? People can be happy. People can go through life and not have to worry about, what's happening when they're sleeping at night, or what's happening to their kids or anything else. And we have to go back to that. And sometimes that's what it takes to get there. Not that we always like it. And again, not, I'm not a war person myself. I don't really like war. I don't condone it, but I do understand a lot of the components behind it and what happens and why it happens. And I think that that's, again, important as well, because even if one country, say, chooses not to be in battle or to be in war, um, we have to realize that other countries don't choose or take that same path. Or I shouldn't say the countries, because it's not oftentimes the people that are making the decisions, it's the leaders. And so that's why I think it's hard. We have to be careful not to just group everything into this country or that country. A lot of times it is the leaders that are making these decisions. And that's where we want to look and consider, well, how many leaders do we have that actually are for peace? And one of the things that we know about the wars is the wars fund the elites. The wars build the pockets of the corrupt elite, and that is not really a favorable thing by any means for anybody in there. So when we have leaders who are willing to make peace, who are willing to stop wars, to bring wars to an end, to have the strength to be able to hold the ground so that we don't have to be in war, I think that's a really important thing, as opposed to those leaders who are going out and actively creating and engaging wars in there. In November, we're going to see a lot of twists and turns that are going to be happening. Upheaval is going to be coming from those that are in influential positions, because they are the ones that are failing, and they are using this deflection in there, and they're trying to make everybody else appear as if they are the ones creating the upheaval. And so we really have to keep an eye on those people who are in influential positions. And we really want to make sure that, we're seeing where things are really coming from. And it's going to be very difficult. That is just, we've been in this kind of phase for a couple of months at least, and maybe 3 or 4 months even. A lot of this year, this twists, this turns, this confusion, not knowing who's on which side and who's doing what completely. And there is a lot of this deflection energy, like, oh no, I didn't create the upheaval, you created the upheaval. And we have to be careful of that, because this is the twisting and the brain programming and the brainwashing aspects that go on, that said, well, you do this because you created the upheaval because you didn't comply. And if you didn't comply, that forced me to take these horrible actions against people, type of thing. So they twist it. And it's, when you look at that, it's like, no, I didn't create the upheaval. You created the upheaval. And it just gets twisted and turned. And so we want to be very careful of this. We want to be very careful and realize where that deflection is happening. If we are going to get into the truth of things, if we're going to get into really understanding who's doing what. So a lot of things, again, not necessarily being what they appear to be. And we're going to have to be very careful for that when it comes into world events. And, we've seen this with some recent deep fakes that came out with the Israel-Hamas war and different things where, the deep fakes, like there was a picture that went out that was supposed to be burned babies. And then somebody came out and said, no, this was an AI generated picture that wasn't really burned babies. And it was actually a puppy that had been AI adjusted. And then when some other people did some further research on it, they said, no, the puppy was the AI generated picture to cover for the burned babies. So now you sit there going, well, what's the truth? What's real? What's where? So these are the things that to a certain extent we have to pay attention. And in some ways, it's more important to pay attention to what is being presented and to realize that so much on both sides are not truth. They are not presenting the full truth. They're presenting a picture that they want to present, and that these deep fakes and the pictures and the videos and so many times that, yes, we have wars going on, and I don't want to minimize the tragedy of the wars by any means, because there are a lot of innocent people who are being killed, who are being abused, who are being violently tortured and various other things. But at that same time, we have to be very careful, because a lot of times they reuse the video footage over and over again, and it may not even be in the area. And one of those came out also mid-October, showing that, yeah, this actually was video from another war. And we've seen that before in some of the other things when we saw the Ukraine stuff come out. So all I can say is be very, very careful and realize that a lot of what is being promoted around both, whether you look at the truther community or the mainstream media or any of these different channels, that there's a lot that isn't what it appears to be, and that what you're seeing may not actually be what is. So that aspect of discretion is really incredibly important for us in November. And again, sometimes it's more important to consider what are they trying to present to us versus what is actually there, because that is the programming that is trying to be put into our heads, again, from both sides of things. Now, we also are likely to see greater violence being called for in November. So, I mean, things are going to go hot in November, hotter than what we've seen over the summer. In some ways, we may see war being pushed more. We're going to see attacks being made on those who don't support the corruption, who don't support the institutional systems. We'll see more jailing of the innocent, and property seizures are going to come up during the month of November, just for supporting freedom, truth, and integrity. So this is that time where, okay, there's going to be these attacks made. There's going to be, in some ways, this is a retaliation for the good making progress, so to say, for um, for freedom and truth and integrity coming out. This is almost like a retaliation, and the violence and the war amplifies when those who want the power, who are misusing it, are losing that power. So keep that in mind. And a lot of this appearance of violence coming up, or more violence being shown in the media channels, is part of instilling fear in people, because they realize that the more violence they show to people, the more that they traumatize people. The more violence that they show to people, the more they put people in fear, because people's minds start thinking, well, what if that happened on our soil? What if that happened here? What if, and the mind starts to really run away. And the point of this is, if they can get people in fear, then people become more controllable. When people are not living in fear, they're not very controllable. And so that's a big part of exposing this violence, because then you create the trauma and you create the fear and these different thought patterns that allow people to become more controllable in the process of things. It's going to be really important during November to stay out of large crowds, protests, major cities. Well, I mean, I know there's people that can't avoid the major cities. That's where they live. I get that. And the riots, but you definitely need to use some extra caution, and don't go and be in these crowded events around this time, and especially with the upheaval and the distortion. I think a lot of the events that might come up in crowds, or the things that happen in crowds, may be a little more orchestrated. And so it's easy for innocent people to get pulled into that, because what they do is they don't actually have a lot of people out there. On one hand, it looks like a lot of people, but they don't actually have a lot of people out there. And what they do is they rely on people to show up to these different things to create the crowds and the masses. So you really, again, this discernment of knowing what you're showing up for, who's calling you to show up, and so they rely on those crowds to come in and cover them so that they can do what they want to do and orchestrate the things that they want to orchestrate that will create the violence and the fear. So keep that in mind. I don't recommend being out there. The key is for us to get heard in peaceful and legal ways. That means showing up at your board meetings. That means showing up at your local forums where you can voice things and it is legal to do it, and they give you the platform to do it, so to say. And those are the various meetings: your city meetings, your community meetings, your school board meetings, things like that. Those are the places, those are your legal channels. And again, doing it in peaceful ways. You're going to be heard a lot more in many ways. I mean, we've gotten to this society where people dramatize everything because it's really about attention. It's not about the purpose or the motive or any of that, but when you show up with facts, when you show up in a peaceful and calm manner, and you actually present things, and many times you will be heard better. I know there's a lot of different thoughts on that, but the dramatization of things, these people becoming very radical to get on camera, um, that's about attention. That's about attention. That's not about solving things. So keep that in mind as well. It's important that we stay out of battles that do nothing but focus, or force, that want to create division. We need to stay out of the battles where um, we're being focused on opposite forces. What we need to do at this point, and I'm not expressing very well at the moment, but what we need to do is to bring opposite forces together. Um, there's going to be a lot of attempts to divide, to create division between people. And what we want to do is pull our focus around to be able to harmonize and to balance with opposing forces. Now, this doesn't mean we have to sacrifice all kinds of things. This doesn't mean that we have to give in and give up what we're standing up for. But we also want to realize that most of the time, our opposing forces, except for maybe some of the extremists, are really looking for the same thing. And they're really looking for that safe world. They're really looking to um, do it. But until we start to blend and to come, I hate that phrase, come together now. We used to love that phrase. I don't like that phrase so much anymore. But um, until we start to join in with one another and work together, and and realize that we're really on the same side, we're not actually in opposition to each other, that's when we're really going to be able to make some major progression. And I think we're moving more in that direction. I think more and more people are finding their common ground pieces to work from. And I think that that's going to be the thing, because we have to realize it's not us versus them. It is the people versus the dictators and the corruption. And we want to bring that out. We need to remember that, again, we hold the power in situation. The masses hold the power in things. And when we realize that we can have different opinions and still be on the same side, that's when we're going to start harnessing that power. We're going to see in November a lot of parallel economies rising up, and they're going to strengthen more, they're going to rise up more. So this is going to be very favorable in a lot of ways. This is going to be a call, again, to support small businesses, to support your local farmers, to know your community people. And we're going to see different systems rising up that will not ban people who are standing up for freedom or truth, or um, will not censor them, will not play some of the games that are involved. And that's going to be a great thing for people. That's going to be a great thing when we can have this diversifying of options for payments, for money systems, um, for working things out. I think one of the big things that's going to be coming back in, and I don't know if we'll see it so much in November, but it is going to be coming back in, will be more of an aspect of trade. And trade, again, it's another non-trackable form, and that's really part of what the parallel economies are about, is things that are well, some of it is non-trackable, and some of it is, again, just not is about dealing with people and companies that will not play these banning games, that will not shut people down for their opinions. You know, it's different when somebody is actually operating as a terrorist, or operating in extreme violence, but that has been twisted and distorted a lot of times to where they're just calling parents terrorists, and um, insurrectionist and things like that. So um, that's not okay, because that's not the truth, and um, that's not the society we want. That just supports dictatorial structures. So the parallel economies are going to be very valuable to us, and especially when revolutionary things happen, when the upheaval is happening, those parallel systems are what see us through. They're the ones that get us through, and they're the ones that come back where people say, look, I don't have money for this or that. And it's hitting that point for a lot of people. I'm hearing from people that more and more people are using credit cards just to buy food and the basic needs. And when that happens, at some point, those credit cards run out. And then what do you do? So that's where more the trade economy comes in, because people say, I don't have this, but hey, I can come and help you in your fields for a couple of hours in exchange for some food. And these start to become great deals and great workable options for people. So, we just want to make sure that we're not giving in to the systems and the structures that want to control us out of fear or out of urgency. And it's very easy to do that when things get a little uncomfortable, when things feel a little bit scary. It's very easy to just say, well, I'll just do this because I don't want to go down a certain path, or I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. And when we do that, that teaches them where our breaking point is, and it teaches them where they can control us. And that is never going to work in our favor. So we need to make sure that we hold strong, and that the choices that we make are not made out of fear or urgency or under pressure like that. It's better to step back, take a clear look, and start evaluating, well, what other options do I have? What else can I do? Now, from the 1st through the 22nd, we're going to see an increase in attempts to create more um, um, chaos, more hatred, more violence coming up. So this is a time where I'm not sure if everybody's really ready for this violence to come out. But it's going to wake people up, and that's the thing. Even when we go through these hard times, it is going to wake people up, because some people, they need that extreme to wake them up and to show them what's really happening, to the point that they can't deny it anymore. So I would definitely be prepared for that increase in the chaos and the hatred and things to come up, but also be prepared to say, look, let's not be in this hatred. Let's choose something different. Let's sit down and discuss our different views, and not be in this chaos, not be swept up by it. And we have that choice. We don't have to get involved in it. They can attempt it, they can instigate things, but we don't have to play the game. And that is truly, truly important for us to keep in mind. So we want to think about that when we start feeling that coming up. We want to stop and say, no, we don't need to be in hatred. What we need to do is we need to take action on some things. We need to not be swept up in this chaos and the confusion and sit back and say, okay, let's look at this from a clear mind. Let's actually break this down a little bit in there. What is going to be good about this is that there will be a lot of things that will get blocked. So I don't think it's going to be as bad as it could be. Will it amplify from where we've been? Yes, I think it will. But will it be as bad as it could be? Will it be super in people's face? I don't think so, because I think there are going to be some things that are going to stop it before it comes up. So I think there might be some things already in place to a certain extent. Um, um, and a lot of this, again, is going to come down to people saying, um, let's not be in this division. Let's sit down. Let's discuss things out a little bit more. And again, the corruption, they want that division. They want people fighting each other. They want suffering for those who are non-compliant to their desires. And just because somebody's non-compliant doesn't make them a bad guy. Okay, if somebody is non-compliant to violence, if somebody is non-compliant to murder, to other things, then that's actually a good thing. That's actually a good thing that they don't want those things, and that they're willing to stand up and not participate in those things. So really look carefully at those. And I'm sorry, my nose is itching. Really look carefully at those things. And we have to be extra, extra careful, because in this push, in this attempt to create the chaos, one of the ways that they're going to do that is they're going to make another attempt at removing rights and freedoms and increasing censorship. So we're going to continue to see that. We're seeing it done in little pieces month after month, and some people haven't even noticed it that much, but then one day they go, I can't post this anymore. I can't do that anymore. Oh, this word, all of a sudden, none of my post goes through when I use this word or that word or whatever it is. And so we, again, need to be very careful about this. We need to be on top of this, and we need to make sure that we don't just go, oh, okay, we just won't do that anymore. These are dangerous things. That compliancy can be very, very dangerous to us, and it can happen in very subtle ways. So again, this is about creating division and good guy, bad guy sort of dynamics. And we need to, again, get down and look at the real issues instead of just being in the battle of everything. Competition is going to increase for those that are insecure, and competing brings harsher things for us to face. So this is a thing for us to keep in mind when we get into this division. Well, part of the division is to get us competing against each other. When we compete against each other, we forget our value and our worth. We step out of the divine alignment. When we do that, we take ourselves down unfavorable paths. And that competition is always about status. It's always about symbols. So the people that are most driving the competition, most driving, trying to get you to compete with them, are the least secure people. They're the ones that have a lot of insecurities. And if we go down this path, we're going to bring up a lot harder things. The challenges are going to get harder. Things are going to become more in our face than they've ever been. The battles are going to increase. The violence is going to increase. So nothing is going to turn around for the better if we are engaging in the competition. Again, we want to think of this action mode, being in the action mode. What is my value and worth? When I understand my value and worth and realize that these super rich, distorted, corrupt elite groups of people who want all of this power and control, they are nothing without me. They are nothing in many ways without me, because without me, without people as a collective supporting them, buying their products, believing what they say, and following their orders, they're nothing. They have no power. And all of their companies and all of their corporations don't work if I'm not buying into it, if I'm not purchasing those things. So these are the things we want to be careful. What we really want to stay focused on is, how do we break through these things? How do we come into real solutions? How do we say enough is enough, and let's transform the past? Let's not go down the paths that we went down in the 60s. We know there were a lot of things that went down in the 60s that were very intense. And there were a lot of people fighting for, I think, what they believed was the right thing. And also, that is when a lot of these movements and these twists and these turns were happening. That's when things happened with the Kennedys, and we had assassinations going on, and we had different things happening at that time. Um, and we need to break through these things. We need to transform it so that we don't keep repeating the past. The aspects that have happened in the past, we need to just simply learn from them and move forward, and don't allow ourselves to get broken down even when we want to just break down and give up on things. That's the time that we are so close to breaking through, and we need to hold strong in our world. So consider that as world events are coming up, as these different chaos factors are coming up, and saying, no, we need to break through this. We need to say, how do we not have these things repeat themselves? How do we not get swept up in these um, socialist narratives and these various narratives that were um, very active, say, back in the 60s, back at the time that Revolution was written by the Beatles and what that was about. So the 23rd through the end of the month, we're going to see a lot of attempts coming in to destroy spirit. So it's kind of like, okay, if you're not going to comply, we're going to try to break your spirit down any way that we can break it down. So we're going to need a lot of patience, we're going to need a lot of perseverance, and we're going to need to put forth a lot of effort to see the successes come out of this, because people want to break down your value. They want to make you feel worthless during this time. And that is going to be one of the psyops, or the information warfares that are going to be put out there, that people are powerless, that people can't defend themselves, that the new world stuff is going to go through no matter what, and there's nothing you can do about it. So we want to be very careful that we don't let this materialistic mindset, this control mindset, this manipulation mindset overpower us and pull us out of the spirit and make us give in to that. It's very, very important that we stand strong. Now, we need to make sure we're also meeting responsibilities and obligations. We just must not give up. That's the important thing. Don't give up. I know that sometimes it feels heavy, and I know it feels hard at times. And I know there are those times you just want to break down and say, I can't take anymore. But that's exactly the time that we need to double up our energy and say, no, I'm not giving up on things. I'm going to persevere and move forward. Power battles are going to rise between world leaders during this last week and a half of the month of November. So expect a lot more world leader conflict. And why is this coming up? Again, because there are some world leaders, they want to keep the wars going. They want to perpetuate the wars, and they want to use war to hold people in fear. They want to use wars as an excuse to control people, to shut down, to remove rights and various things like that. So we really want to watch where those world leaders are, and again, realize that, hey, this is their battle. This is not our battle. We don't need to be participating in this. And unless it's on your own home ground in your own yard, this is not what we need to be participating in. Tyrants, it's going to be like tyrants versus those that are fighting for rights. So we're going to see those power battles coming up again. So a lot of battles going on, and we need to really appreciate those people who are willing to stand up for rights and to stand up for our ability to be free and to have a life and to choose the things that we love to choose, because um, you know there's so many layers mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, everything connected to that. We will need to find ways to be more self-sufficient. So again, looking at it, how do I become self-sufficient? How do I become less dependent on the systems? And that doesn't mean just going down green channels, because a lot of the green channels aren't really truly self-sufficient, not like they're presented to be, and they're not truly environmentally friendly. So we want to really consider that, getting back to more natural ways and things when you're stockpiling anything. If you are a person that likes to stockpile, or a prepper or something like that, really considering what are your dry foods, what can you do that doesn't need electricity, that doesn't have to be frozen, that doesn't have to be refrigerated, and where's your backup in that sense? But more so, I think even too, just extra water on hand, blankets on hand, um, candles or flashlights on hand, different things like that that I think are important as a backup in emergency situations. And again, not that we necessarily will hit that, but the more self sufficient we are, the less we depend on those people who don't have our best interest in mind. And that's the real aspect of self sufficiency, is that I'm not reliant on the system to do it. I face a lot of this in my own life. I'm caught between every crevice and not eligible for a lot of things out there, and I've had to work hard to make myself self-sufficient and operate outside of the systems in very difficult situations. And I will continue to do that. I will continue to find the paths and the ways to do that. And the gift in that is that I've learned that I really don't need the systems um, the way that they've been programmed into us to believe that we need them, that we're reliant on them, that we can't function without them. We absolutely can. And that scares the heck out of them to no end. We really want to increase our well-being, our ability to take care of ourselves, our focus on our health, because our health is in a vulnerable space. So I think that we are going to see more health and financial challenges come up. So I would expect I would expect interest rates to rise. I would expect cost of living to go up again. I would expect um, eh, possibly more viruses and things being released, more diseases being known, although the disease area is not working so well for them these days. But that doesn't mean, that people's bodies aren't being broken down. Certainly, a lot of the food system is being contaminated right now, so that, they're kind of saying, oh, okay, well, maybe we don't have to release diseases. We'll just contaminate the food supply to a certain extent. So I would expect more to be coming out around the food supply and what's happening with that, and the contamination of it, and how that is creating illnesses in the body. So again, people need to really think carefully. Who are your local farmers? There's a lot of great farmers out there that are doing organic practices, but they're not listed as organic simply because they haven't gotten the certifications. It's worth knowing that. It's worth checking it. It's worth realizing, okay, I could go shop a little further out, but I can get my quality food, and I can stock up on water, and I can do various things and do that maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, as opposed to going to the market a couple of times a day. Um, Getting into some of that aspect, I think, is going to be important. And again, the way we offset that is extra rest, extra care, getting off of the electronics, spending time in nature, doing things that are healthy for your body and staying on that healthy focus. And it's hard when the stress and the tensions and everything come up. It's hard to do. I understand that. So, as far as actions that we want to focus on for this upcoming month in November, from the 1st through the 24th, the actions that we wanted to focus on taking is to support decentralized systems and freedom. We want to take command of our own life and increase our self sufficiency as much as possible. We want to look at what creates a favorable future without turning over our power. And we definitely can do that. We don't have to turn over our power. And matter of fact, almost anything that requires you to turn over your power, and to give up your rights and your freedoms is not going to create a favorable future. It's only under the illusion of that. That's only the statements that are being made, but that's not what it actually is. So keep that in mind. Recognize where destruction is happening under the guise of being to your benefit. And that's, again, another big way of how they do that breaking of spirit. That's like those, they make those promises and they don't follow through on them. That's a big part of this whole aspect of, we hear this a lot. We hear this a lot where it comes through in the leaders are like, oh, everything's fine. Oh, the economy's doing great. Oh, it's this or that. And it's not. It's just words that they're spewing out of their mouth. And we need to realize that just because somebody says something doesn't mean that they're true to their word. It doesn't mean that that's what's happening. And again, we need to recognize what destruction is actually happening. They can say all over the place that, oh yeah, things are in a good position and jobs are better and money's better. But you know what? When you're not working or you're having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make the most basic ends meet, or you go to the store and where you used to pay $3 for eggs, you're paying 7 or 8 or some places 10 from what I hear. Um, and these things, I mean, how is that better? That's not that's destruction that's happening, and it doesn't match with what's being said. And then there will be a lot of things where, again, in the control patterns where they want to control people, and it's going to be, well, we're going to um, um, restrict you from having this or restrict you from having that. And it's like, yeah, we're going to restrict that because it's better for you. And so they want to tell you what's best for you. They want to make all of your choices for you. And this is not a path we want to go, because once we start down that path, we're just turning everything over, and we're creating our own destruction in the process of that um, aspect in there. So again, be very, very careful whenever somebody comes out and says this is to your benefit, especially if it's coming from the government. If this is to your benefit, you better start asking a lot of questions on that. In my opinion, you know, that's a big red flag to me, honestly. We need to implement a lot of patience, and the more desperate corruption gets, the more it exposes itself. So this is one of those factors that if corruption can stir up enough trouble to get people reacting divided and all of that, um, and get them in that urgency and that fear, then they don't have to be exposed. But when we sit back and say, let me think on this a little bit, let me look at this a little bit deeper, and we have the patience and we implement that patience, well, the corruption gets very impatient in that process, and they get very nervous and anxious because they can feel themselves losing power, and then they take more dramatic steps, and then they end up exposing themselves. And so a little bit of patience can go a long way in finding out the truth in something. So consider that as you're moving forward. Have, again, extra supplies on hand. That's one of our action steps for the first 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, really. Have extra supplies on hand, especially to deal with weather and outages, because we do have a very good chance we're going to be seeing weather manipulation happen, whether that's through HARP or whether that's through other things. And so we can probably expect some pretty good storms to roll through in November in many places. We want to focus on how do we stay safe and don't take chances. So weather can come out of anywhere. So if let's say the forecast is saying, oh, the storm's going to come in at 6 o'clock this evening. It would be better for you to consider, how do I make sure I'm out of the office at 4 o'clock? Give yourself that extra hour or so and say, okay, well, if it takes me 30 minutes to get home, the storm's not supposed to start till 6. Well, if I leave at 4, then I can be home at 4:30, an hour and a half before the storm. You're going to find that you just barely make it home before the storm starts, or it will start as you're heading home. So don't take chances, because these storms can turn very quickly. They can turn much more dangerous than expected. And as we know, when weather manipulation tactics are used, most of the time the storms cannot be actually controlled. They can be initiated, but they can't usually be controlled, and they usually end up becoming bigger or heavier storms than what's anticipated. So be extra careful. Don't take the chances. Keep things in your car. Keep things at home. You don't want to be trying to figure out, can I get to the store at the last minute to pick something up or to have it? Just, keep your storage of food and just rotate it out. And again, you don't have to go and do some big stockpiling thing. You just pick up, a couple of extra things every time, pick up a couple extra things that are in jars and stuff that will hold well and that will hold in different temperatures and things like that, and go from there. You can build it up a little bit at a time, and then you just rotate it in so that you're eating the oldest stuff first, and then you always have something fresh there to eat when you need it. Um, movement comes where we release addiction. So, one of our action points during this first 3.5 weeks is to look at what are you addicted to? And I'm not talking just drugs and alcohol and things like that, but also addicted to power, addicted to attention, addicted to people, addicted to situations, addicted to socialization, things like that. And look at, what are your alternatives? What are healthier ways to meet these needs that you have? What's the root cause? Get in and do some of that work, and that's going to be really valuable. And the reason I say that is because, again, addictions are one of those things that are easily used to control us. They're very easy for um, narratives to be established. It's very easy for those who want power and control over us to use those to manipulate us into what they want. And so a lot of our society is that way. We've been trained and programmed to be addicted to certain things, whether that is addicted to comforts, whether that is addicted to basic, sometimes even basic needs in a sense, whether we're addicted to certain people in our life, whether we're addicted to our pets, whether we're addicted to these things. And then as they realize where people's strongest addictions are, or they realize our individual addictions, that's what they try to use against us. Well, you don't want anything to happen to grandma. Oh, you don't want anything, to go wrong here. Or and the reason again, it comes back to this fear. If they have an addiction to work with, if there's something you're addicted to, it's so easy to manipulate you. It's so easy to say, well, we'll just take this away from you. And then, you know, but if you want it, you can do A, B, C, or D for us. S- So really work on that. And I know it's a gradual thing. I know it doesn't happen overnight. And again, an addiction is really that thing that you can't say no to. Um, it's anything that you can't say no to. It's anything that you have super strong cravings and desires for in there. And that doesn't mean that we don't get those desires or cravings once in a while, but um, when we can't let them go, when we, have these strong attachments to them. And most of the time, our addictions really are just connected to unresolved issues in our life. So if we just dig in and do a little soul work, we will remove those addictive patterns and we can release them. And, you know, it is there. And there is a difference between saying, well, I enjoy having this, but if I need to do without it, that's not a problem either. I can do without it. And again, so just working on that, trying to cut down the next layer of that, trying to release that as much as possible. And again, that frees us up to where we cannot be controlled so easily. We want to take the actions to show, to be in devotion to God, to divine source, to having faith. And that all brings success for us. The more we choose that alignment to keep divine presence alive in our world, whether you refer to divine presence as God or source or whatever you choose it as, divine source, that is something we need to keep alive. So we need to double up our commitment to truth, to integrity, to spiritual values, these sorts of things, spiritual attributes, living in that, being that. And when we do that, that will also feed and nourish our success in the world and to help shield and protect us as we have to face the challenges that are given to us by those who seek power and control and who do not want God or divine presence active in our world. So very important, again, holding strong in that truth and integrity goes hand in hand with that. Now, the last week and a half of the month, actually the last week of the month, we want to have our actions focus on releasing material excess, prioritizing things of real value, and realizing, look, things of real value are not my material things. They're not my boat. They're not, an expensive mansion or sports car. The things of real value are the time like I share with people, the quality of conversations that I'm having with people, being able to have the opportunity to watch a sunrise or a sunset. um, being able to get out and enjoy nature, to enjoy what the season is providing, and to be in just these real, raw, authentic conversations. To be able to appreciate the time that I have with friends, family, doing things together with people, exploring things, expanding my knowledge, my awareness on things. So, really taking a look at that and say, look, I could live a lot more simply and I can let these things go and then focus on what's going to provide real happiness for me, real genuine happiness, not just a superficial thing. Again, a lot of material things are nice. I'm not knocking them. There's nothing wrong with them. But we're at a point where the more we can release the excess of things, and that doesn't mean living in deprivation or suffering or any of those things. It just means a shift in values. And I think that's going to be important. And that's also plays very well with our season, so it's a very natural flow aspect of things. We want to free ourselves from restrictions as much as possible. Um, Being able to look at ways we can increase our freedom, increase our ability to have choices over our life. We want to realize that during this time, we want to give a lot of attention to the choices that we're making because they will have a major impact, not just in our life, but in our world. Because again, what we choose for ourselves is also something that we're choosing um, or supporting or nourishing in the collective energy. And I think that that is very important. The more that we can choose what is simple, what is natural, what is authentic, what is um, divinely created, choosing a real tree versus a synthetic tree, these sorts of things, these all have major impacts. They have major impacts on the direction we go. They have major impacts on what happens in our world, and they have major impacts on what happens beyond our world, honestly. So, really looking at that, giving careful consideration to any choices that you do make. Stand strong and don't give into fear and threats that might come up. Again, because fear and threats are going to be a big catalyst used in November to push people to take actions that they don't necessarily want to take. And we need to be able to stand up to that and say, no, we're not going to go down that path. No, we're not going to make those choices. And, you know, most of the time, I mean, yes, there are times that threats do get acted out, but most of the time they're not. It's all about instilling fear. And we have to be able to stand strong and say, no, I just won't play it. I won't do it. I won't go down that path. We want to take a look at where we've gotten off course, and we want to take the action to correct that. So, as people find out more information, it's important for them to come forward and to say, look, I'm really sorry that, there was so much, I attacked you in certain ways, and I realize now that, that was not a good choice or a good thing, and I'm choosing a different course now. This is important because when people, my nose is really itching today. I'm so sorry. Um, we really want to correct where we've gotten off of course. So again, looking at where things have pulled away from God, from divine source, from spiritual principles and values, and moving back into that direction. Um, Being willing to admit, look, okay, I made a bad choice, or I got off course and now I'm coming back on course. Being willing to forgive people for getting off of course and to say, great, okay, as long as you're on course, we can work together in things. We can move forward in things, and let's do that because we're certainly going to be more powerful as a team than just as individuals. Not to undervalue the individual by any means, because the individual is incredibly powerful, but also to realize the value of having more people working towards a common goal or a common um, aspect in things. And so um, stand up, be accountable. It's a good thing and it's a beautiful thing when people are sincerely accountable for what they've done and they actually take the actions to follow up on the shifts and the changes and being in that. We want to embrace the successes and share those successes with those that are truly in need. So let's say you have something coming through. Let's say you've been working hard and things have been coming along and you're doing well. And you know of some people, and I'm not talking about supporting the freeloaders in the system. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those people who are truly in need. I could say, like myself, send me a donation. um, but, I laugh about that. But I mean, really looking at who is falling between the cracks, who is not being helped, who is trying to help themselves in some way, who is trying to contribute in some way, um, and supporting those people because people are in hard times and we shouldn't just turn our back on them. But we also need to be able to discern, are they truly in hard times? Are they trying to do anything? Are they doing what they can? Are they somebody who genuinely cannot do things and need help? Or are they people that are just pretending to not do anything and they just don't want to do anything? It's not that they can't, they're just not willing to do it. And there's a very big difference in there. And when we have that discernment and we take some of our successes and we help those that are truly in need, um, this puts us into a humanitarian space. And this can be people, this can be rescuing an animal, this can be doing something favorable for the earth and the land, like not using chemicals in your yard and shifting over to organic and natural and regenerative gardening processes and things like that that definitely do benefit and definitely do take different things. So again, looking at these different components and saying, hey, look, I don't have a lot extra, but you're welcome to come share a meal with me, or you're welcome to do this. And most of us can do that. Most of us can offer that up. Not always, not everybody, because there are people that genuinely don't have that ability. They're just in those hard spots, and I've been there. I know it, and I'm got a foot in them again. It happens. It's just part of where life is at for me, and I have every faith that it's going to be turning around. So, and I continue to take the steps to make that happen. So, looking at that, I think is big, and just considering where we can. Now, our mindset, where we want to keep our mind, where we want to keep our thoughts focused from the 1st through the 9th. So basically the first little over a week of the month, we want to stay focused on completing things. We want to stay focused on looking at what things are coming to completion in our world events and our world affairs. Taking a look at that is going to be very important. How do we close things down? How do we bring them into the completion so that we can move on to other things? And I think we're going to see a lot of that happening in the world. And I think that's going to be a big focus on people doing that. So you've got the mixture because you've got the corruption who wants to keep the upheaval going. And then you've got those who are standing against the corruption that are trying to bring things to completion. So I think we're definitely going to see those different views happening in the first week of the month. We want to keep our mind on reflecting on what is happening and the cycles that are completing. Again, what cycles are completing, what cycles are opening up. And, we can look back to the 60s are one of those points that we can look at it and say, yeah, we're kind of at the same point. What completed at that time, what was wrapping up, what was starting up, and different things like that. And how are we repeating some of the things that we had going on at that time in there? I think that is important. We need to meet what needs to be done from the soul self. And this is very important because there are probably going to be some hard things that need to be done, things that we need to be responsible for, we need to take care of. But it's not just about doing them, it's about doing them from the soul self. It's about working from the heart energy. And this is where gentle strength comes in. It's like when you're dealing with a bully or something like that, or an abuser or something like that. You can't just be weak and mild and go, oh, I love you and I care for you. And it's okay that you're abusive. No, that's not what I mean by coming from the soul self. Um, with the soul self, we sit there and we say, we don't have to engage in the battle and the violence and the other pieces, but we simply come back and say, no, no, you're not going to hit me again. No, you're not going to do this again. No, verbal abuse isn't acceptable. And I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to hold you accountable for those actions. Um, I'm not going to engage in battle with you. I'm not going to just be meek and let you do whatever you want to me. I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to stand my ground. Um, but I'm not going to repeat the patterns. I'm not going to necessarily fight war with war. And I know that mentality and I understand how people are connecting that in our world today, but we're never going to end war with war. It just perpetuates the energy and feeds the energy of war, is what it does. And so we need to be strong enough to stand up and say, no, this is not how it's going to play out. We are not going to participate in this. And that's where you're coming from, the soul self. That's where you're coming from, that aspect of, I love you, I care about you, but that doesn't give you the right to abuse me. That doesn't give you the right to mistreat me and things. We also want to look at, there's going to be a lot of understanding of how current events connect with our past. Again, part of why I chose what I chose, go back and look at the 60s. And this is an opportunity, and realize that where we are connecting with our past, this is our opportunity to heal unfairness. So we want to have in our mind, how do we heal the injustices? And we start with that by our own life and our own choices. How do we stop being in that victim pattern without becoming the abuser? How do we heal that unfairness or that sense of injustice in our life? And we do that by finding our own sense of value and our own sense of worth, and stop relying on people and things for that. And when that happens and we're not relying on them, their choices cannot have the same impact on us. And we can't stop them from making the choices that they want to make, but we again don't have to participate in them. And this is our opportunity to heal the unfavorable directions we've taken ourselves down. Now, from the 10th through the end of the month, so good portion of the month, the last 3 weeks of the month, we see a mindset that's coming into the collective that is about releasing rebellion to gain clarity. So, especially with what is unjust and unfair. So, the more that things are playing out, the more these narratives are pushed, the more extremist actions are taken on things, the more people actually are going to stop rebelling against it, and they're going to start coming together more. They're going to start realizing the truth in things, and they're going to start seeing what truly is unjust and what truly is unfair, and how so many things are perpetuated through war, through battles, through violence, through different things in our world, that it's not about one side being right or the other. Who's really in the unjust and the unfair position? It's the average innocent person, which is the bulk of the population in there. And what is unfair? Unfair is this slaughtering, this killing, these different things that are going on. So being able to release our rebellion allows us to draw in the strength and to be in a position where we can actually handle things in there. So getting in that mindset, let me stop getting out of the fighter mindset. Let me stop getting, let me get out of that reactive mindset so that I can actually take action on something. We then also want to use creativity. We need to draw on our creativity, mental creativity, brainstorming, things like that, to stand up for what is right, instead of being consumed by what provokes you. So again, a lot of what provokes you has a mental trigger to it in some way, a mental or emotional trigger in it, which connects to a program or a thought pattern that's been instilled. And when we start to look at that and say, look, there are other options. Do we absolutely have to be in a battle? Do we have to have World War III? Do we have to have, a nuclear battle? Do we need these things? We don't. We can have other options. We can choose other ways, and we may have to get a little creative about things, but we need to start standing up again for what's right, and we can use our creativity. So we want to allow our mind to think about different possibilities, different paths, different options of things. We want to draw on our life experiences for wisdom. Do that reflection work, talk to other people and see what their experiences are. Talk not just to so-called intel people and things like that, but to the people that are on the ground there, not just the ones in mainstream media, find out who is actually on the ground and what are they actually experiencing there, and what are their life experiences, or people who have been in these same wars in the past or had families in the wars in the past. What are their experiences that they've had? What is the wisdom that they have to share? And these are the things that we want to draw, and so we want to be thinking about that. We want to keep our mind alert to people trying to control us, especially our thoughts. So this is going to be a big thing in this last 3 weeks of November. Is we're going to see these attempts at mind control. We're going to see these attempts at reprogramming the mind and brainwashing techniques in there. And this has already been expressed. I mean, Hillary came out and said this, what was it, early October or something? And it's like, well, we just need to deprogram people into what we want them to believe. And I mean, that's not her exact words, but I'm paraphrasing on that, but that's basically what she said. And so we want to stop and take a look at that, and to be aware of that. Again, step back, do the reflection. Don't just take those things at face value. Our mindset, we want to look at something or someone for what they really are and not just what we appear to be. We talked about that before. A lot of charm is likely to be used. So we're probably going to see those so-called charmers come up on the media more, which means we'll probably see Trudeau come back up. We'll see Gavin Newsom come back up. We'll see, any of those that have that kind of charm to them coming up, because the corrupt has figured that if they put somebody that has some sort of charm or charisma or soft-spoken up on the screen, that people will not fight them or be as resistant to them as if they put up somebody else on the screen. So we're going to probably see that, and we just need to make sure that we're not being drawn in through some sort of magnetism or things like that, that we're really taking a step back and looking at things from a rational mind, not doing things from an impulsive space, because that's going to be one of the mental tactics or the mental warfare used, is to try to get people to act in a very impulsive way in things. So that's very important. They're going to try to push people into urgency and fear. You've got to act right now. You've got to do this right now. That's going to be pushed a lot in these 3 weeks. The charm is really a Trojan horse. So that's why we have to be so careful of it, because that charm may look good on the outside. The words that they use might sound good on the outside, but what they're really actually implementing, what's going on the inside, is devastation. And we talked about that earlier as well. We want to stay focused on our own health and well-being, again, because we will have this mental mindset. Now, I'm not sure that it's so much physical stuff being released as it is this mental aspect of convincing people that there are these massive diseases. Again, this mind game that, oh, you're going to get sick if you don't do this. You're going to get sick if you don't do that. You're going to cause death to other people if you do this or don't do that. And we gotta be really, really careful of that. And just stay focused. Again, if we're taking the actions to stop and get into clear space, to have our own time, to on our own processes, to work through things without all kinds of distractions and input coming in, that's going to be a big piece for us to stay. And again, keeping our mind healthy is going to be huge, huge, huge during these last 3 weeks. We need to know what is happening and how it is affecting you. So taking a look at that, because I think we could see some mass psychosis come up in extremist areas. I think that we could see some of that happening, that mental instability coming up. And where the corruption has infiltrated, I think that we will see how mental illness is connecting to things that are playing out in our world, which should be very interesting. It's important for us to embrace the challenges as opportunities to transform and grow. So again, this is a mental state of being. We are going to get challenges. Life is always going to have challenges when we're living in a third dimensional world. And people with power and corruption are always going to present challenges to us. The question is can we take those challenges and transform them into something valuable? Can we grow and can we learn from them? Can we use that to help shift us onto a more favorable direction instead of being consumed by them? So these challenges and things are really, they're not, even though they come in physical forms, they're less about a a physical thing than they are about your mental stability or your mental strength. So it's very important to do what you can um, to work on that, to work on not being heavily influenced, and again, really looking at the reality of things. As far as spirit and faith goes, the first week of the month, the first through the seventh, we want to really consider the path that we're taking carefully. And why does this play into world affairs? Because where we keep our soul, where we keep our spirit, greatly affects how we can deal with the world at large, how we can deal with what is happening in the world, events that are going on. And so this is going to be a big time in that first week. We want to take a look at what is truly important, what holds true value versus just what we've been programmed to chase after. And take a look at that aspect. We want to close out what no longer serves us. So the hatred, the division, the arguing, these things don't serve us. We know this. Being in battle does not serve us. And we want to close those things out lovingly, willingly, and go, great, thanks for bringing things to my attention or showing me different things. But you know what? I'm done being in this. I'm done being in this division. I'm done being in this battle. And I'm going to move forward through divine processes and values and let that be my focus and my guide. And that will be huge in seeing us through and helping us to maneuver the world events that are going on. We want to consider conscious creation through our choices for a favorable future. So every choice we make, remember I talked about how choices are very, very important. Every choice that we make is a part of consciously creating our world. And every choice we make has an impact on what direction our future goes. So if we are conscious about the choices that we're making, if we're aware, if we're working with a focus of values in mind and not just that it's associated with this party or that party. I mean, I think we can all agree that healthy food is a great value to have, that, good air to breathe is a healthy value to have. Safe neighborhoods are a good value to have in there. These are all things that create good values, promoting being cordial, kind, open discourse. All of these things are important things to have. So those choices are what will create our favorable future, and realize that when we're choosing from the soul self, when we're choosing with divine principles and values at the center of things, that we actually are in that co-creation position, in that conscious creation position. We need to speak and listen from the heart. So again, it does us no good to just spew things and never listen to what other people are saying. Because again, our oppositions, our opponents, so to say, people who have different views may have some very valid points to make, and they may have some very important things to say. And so we need to not be closing that out, and we need to really look at these valuable pieces and listen. When we really, really, truly listen from the heart, then we can come to some common ground. We can come into some common shared goals. We can realize that, again, we're focusing on a lot of the same things. So, and then when we speak from the heart, we actually make it easier for people to hear what we're saying and to absorb what we're saying, as opposed to just shutting it out because they believe we're sitting on one side of the fence or another in things. So that becomes very important for us. That action is going to benefit us when having to deal with the challenges and deal with other people around things that are happening in our world. And the key in this also calls us to be an inspiration to others during this first week. And that comes by being willing to take the first step. Don't wait for everybody else to do something. If you have something to say, then get down there to a meeting and do it. Be an inspiration for other people to speak up, because there are a lot of people out there who will not speak up or say anything or do anything because they don't want to be the first one. They don't want to be on the very, very front line of things. But when somebody else does it, that kind of gives them the courage. So I say be the inspiration, and that connects in with our spiritual attributes in November. Now, from the 8th through the rest of the month, what we have coming forward in our spiritual attributes that we want to focus on is be open to giving others a second chance if they have truly changed and are focused on a favorable future. So, again, we've had all of this division going on, but if we are coming from the soul self, we will recognize and say, I get it. You've changed. You've got a different point of view. You're seeing different things. You're finally understanding certain things. Again, not in a superior way, right? We don't want to be in that space because that's not going to serve anybody. But in that space of, I'm glad that you're seeing these things. And absolutely, I will, welcome you to be back in my life. Because you've recognized and made these changes and you're no longer being abusive, and that I will welcome back. So again, we want to support people in those changes that they have made. And there are sometimes we're not meant to give a second chance. We have to evaluate each thing on a case by case basis. But if somebody is truly changed, then oftentimes it is worth doing that, and is worth supporting them in that change, so to say. Now, we also want to embrace opportunities to advance divine presence in the world. Spirit can be impacted from the backlash, but must be, we must persevere, we must move forward with it. So what this is saying is we're going to, those that are alert to what's really happening and they're seeing through the narratives and everything, they're probably going to have some periods in this last 3 weeks of rejoicing and saying, yes, we're finally making these breakthroughs. Yes, this is finally coming out in the news. Yes, this is finally being exposed. And that's going to be very exciting because we realize that all of that brings divine presence back into the world when that truth surfaces. And yet at the same time, we need to be on guard and not so wrapped up in that joy. Yes, we want to give that joy a big fullness and support, but we don't want to fully let our guards down, because what happens is when these big progressions are made, for the benefit of humanity, for the benefit of people, for the benefit of our world, what happens in that process is those that are working against divine presence or God in the world, they will backlash and they will reach out and they will try to attack. And this can be, again, anywhere from verbal attacks, abusive behaviors, all the way through assassination attempts. So we want to be very, very careful. And assassination attempts or attempted assassinations are designed to break our spirit. So we want to keep that in mind. That's why it's coming up under this influence in this particular month of November. In these last 3 weeks of it, it's very specifically attempted to break our spirits, to say, oh, well, your joy has just been wiped out because we've just, there are attacks being made on this person that's pioneering things, and that could be various things. So we really want to, again, keep an eye open on where those are happening and not let it break our spirit, and realize that, our power, our force, our ability to deal with things that are happening in the world is not reliant just on one person. It's reliant on the people, on us as individuals being willing to uphold the values and things in our world, the divine presence in our world. So we can see a lot of fear that's going to come in and try to break that spirit down, or to block and prevent successes from happening. But this, we will likely see too, in this aspect of assassinations or attempted assassinations, could be a trigger for bringing more military into the picture. So again, we're going to see another level. I've been talking about this for a couple of months, military on the ground, boots on the ground type of things, military becoming more active, and it has. And we've seen this over and over again, and each time it's amplifying, what we're dealing with in Israel and Iran and these different places, that is a more amplified version of Ukraine and Russia. And these things have been going on for decades and years, and in some cases hundreds of years. And these are not necessarily new things that are happening. They're just being amplified and brought out into the world. And so, but each time there's more military action that is happening. So, it's very likely that that we will see more funding going out to these countries, where we have a leader like Biden, and he'll probably keep sending money out, and they're going to try to keep pushing it um, uh, into these terrorist organizations because they're looking. I mean, this is a form of assassination when they do this. When they take the money, they fund it over to these terrorist organizations. That is a form of assassination that is happening in our world. So, you know, that is the retaliation for um, bringing stuff up. And of course, we see him do this basically every time something comes out against him or his son, for example, comes out, or somebody else that he's aligned with in the corruption uh, factors of things. And every time something comes up, it's like, well, we're going to send more money to this terrorist group, or we're going to send more money over to this country who openly has stated they're funding Hamas, or and it's crazy, but that is assassination. That is a form of assassination that is happening. We want to do a lot of self-care to keep our spirits strong during these 3 weeks. Again, look past the illusions of things that are happening. This includes staying out of other people's battles. If it's not our battle, we need to stay out of it. And their business dealings, because the business dealings can be very dangerous at this time. We're going to probably see a lot of dangerous business dealings brought to the surface during this time. Again, we're going to see the attempts to amplify war and battles and to draw people in that have nothing to do with it. So, America, I think, is going to be one of those countries. They're going to keep trying to draw America in to these battles of things, and we got to be very careful. The corrupt could release more diseases at this time to break our spirit, to break down people's well-being, and to support corrupt business. Again, they're struggling because their finances are in the process of being cut off, and people are not supporting them as a collective anymore. And as a result of that, they're going to try to release things to force people to fund them in some way, whether that is releasing a disease to support the pharmaceutical industry, or whether that is to put them in fear to fund the wars, which end up going back to the corrupt elite and that sort of thing, their business dealings, their charities, their organizations, into things like the UN, the WHO, and various organizations like that. Um, and this is going to be about supporting corrupt business. And when we support corrupt business, that's not, just the big pharma, but that can also include the UN, the WHO, the CDC, things like this. And I think we're going to see them all come into the spotlight again in these last 3 weeks of November. We're going to see them brought back up into the spotlight. So look for the UN, the CDC, the WHO, and the big pharma to all come back up. And electronics are going to be extra hard on our health during this time. So we're really going to need to be careful about the amount of time we're spending on electronics. And we may see more of a push during these last 3 weeks of November towards transhumanism. Well, look, your organic body can't handle this, so you need this electronic piece, you need this installed, you need that installed. We'll probably see another push coming out with biometrics in there, because that is damaging to the health. That does interact and connect with the health, coming through. Again, trying to promote it as a positive thing when it's not, when it's really destructive to the human organic material that we live in, called the human body. Um, so we've got to be very careful of that. So I think we're definitely going to see some things coming out, and that's where we're at for world events. That's what we got coming down the pike in November. I hope you guys all stay strong. I hope these tips help you out. I hope it helps you to know where to keep your focus, where to stay, body, mind, and spirit, what actions to take, how to hold up, and how to protect yourself, because you certainly know what can and cannot break your spirit, and where you're strong and where you're not strong, and where you need to put your focus on things. So it's always great to watch this. It's always great to have this heads up. It helps to keep us from getting caught in the narratives. If you don't have your copy yet again, well, I've got 2023 here, but and I can't even really show it when I have these things up. But 2024, by the way, will come up, is available. You can pick up your copy, and that way you're always got the heads up on what's happening in our world, what's coming down, and how to deal with that on a personal basis, because what happens personally is also happening collectively, and they are interrelated and interacting with each other. And so it's important that we have both of those dynamics to be aware of and get it, have that heads up, and you can check it out again on my website, compassioncodes.com. And until next month, I will see you and stay safe out there.